Okay, so we're going to look at the is-ought distinction today. Now, the key idea here, the key point, is that moral requirements, so the requirement to act in a particular way, they can't come from reason, from rationality. Instead, the only way they can arise is through emotions. That's the central point. Now, this point is made by David Hume. Hume was an empiricist. So he was famous for thinking that all valuable knowledge is a posteriori. Do you remember what a posteriori means? It means through the senses. Now, he thought that reason plays a really important role in establishing truth and falsehood, but it doesn't play an important role in motivating you. So he's combating what he calls the customary view or the traditional view. The traditional view is this one, that reason and passion, they combine together to produce action. You think of yourself really as reason and passion fighting. You know you ought to do this, that's your rational self, but you want to do this and therefore you do one or the other depending upon which one is stronger. Hume thought that's fundamentally wrong. He thought that this was incorrect. Instead, he took this view, that reason plays no real role in decision making whatsoever. The only motivator for your action is your passion. By passions, he means your emotions, right? So your emotions, and importantly, your desires, are the things that make you act. Reason is only there to guide your passions. So your passions decide, that's what I'm going to do, and then your reason helps implement that plan. So Hume put it a bit like this. He said, well, a bit like this is exactly how he put it, in fact, because it's a quote. So rationality is, and ought only to be, the slave of the passions. So reason is only, it's led by passion, by the desires, and can never pretend to any other office. Office means kind of like job. It can't do anything else than to serve and obey them. The only thing, thinks Hume, that reason can do is obey the passions. I want you to think of it a little bit like this. If you think about kind of yourself, here is yourself. You're sat at your desk. You know you ought to write your essay, but you know your kind of your desire may be something else. Or, if you're lucky, your desire might be write that essay. Okay, so you desire to write the essay, and then your reason can then implement that plan. So reason tells you, what to write in it. It gives you a kind of how. But that's all it does. It's guided entirely by your desire, which then produces ultimately your essay. At least we would hope that it produces your essay. If your desire is to do anything else, like go and talk to somebody or go on the internet, then maybe you won't produce an essay. Your reason will help you do that instead. What Hume's saying here is that desire has an effect, right? Desire, or your passions, desire is motivational. That's its role. You may know you need to write an essay and so on, but those are only facts. Knowing it won't mean that you do it. Look around at everybody else in your class. Everyone set the same essay. Some people do it, other people do it late or whatever. There's a difference, right? The facts are the same, but the desire is different. Desire is motivational. It's the thing that makes you do stuff. Whereas reason is purely factual. Now, turning to the realm of ethics, this is how Hume gets to the is-ought gap. So he says that fact statements, like, let me give you an example of a fact statement, something like charities exist, or charities need help. That is missing an L. Charities need help. I'm just trying to write help correctly. Maybe there's a cry for help. Okay, so that's a fact statement. Hume says that this in itself is established through reason. Like we can use our a posteriori knowledge to gain that knowledge. So is statements are established through reason. But you can see all of the adverts you want to saying that charities need help. It doesn't mean that you're going to do anything about it. In fact, the only way that you're going to do something about it is if you have a desire to, and that is an ought statement, a moral statement. So something like, I ought to help people. Okay, I ought to help. That is something that comes from within. It is a desire. And that is motivational. So you can see here Hume's anti-realism, right? He doesn't think that morality is a fact in the world, but instead you can see quite clearly that it is what we call internalist. It is purely in your mind. Now, having established all of that, we get to the is-ought gap itself. You have this fundamental distinction between is statements, factual statements that are true or false and are factual, and ought statements that are not true or false and therefore not factual. And what Hume says is that it's not that reason guides the passions towards action, it's that passions act alone, your desires act alone, and may be aided by reason in as much as helping to implement a path. What that means for morality is that no matter how many is statements we have, statements about the way that morality is, or whatever, they're not going to produce an ought statement. You cannot, he says, go from an is statement to an ought statement. That is fundamentally impossible. And that brings us on to his conclusion. His conclusion is that is statements, they cannot ever produce ought statements. They can't motivate you. You cannot get an ought from an is. As Hume writes, morals excite passions and produce or prevent actions. So moral rules do those sorts of things. In other words, they are passions. Reason, though, is utterly impotent. It can't do anything, is what that means in this particular. It can't produce or prevent actions. And so he says, the rules of morality, therefore, are not conclusions of reason. Morality is not a rational system.